Hello again, friends of Summit Christian School. Mr. Brian Stock, Director of Advancement and Admissions, back with you for part 2 of our 4-part series with our former principal, Mrs. Melanie Kemp. This time we asked her the question, what inspired you to take that leadership role as principal and administrator over the school back in its early and founding days? And what we find is an incredible story of how God had prepared her for this role, for this job, without her even knowing it. So we are very blessed by the legacy that she leaves through her leadership. We hope you enjoy part 2.
Well, how did I come to be principal? That's an LOL, laugh out loud. I came to the school in 1986, and Summit Christian School was a school of about 70 kids, and they were spread through pre-K through 4th grade. The idea of the board was that they wanted to grow the school and add a 5th grade. So I became the 2nd grade teacher, and that was a step of faith that year in that the church was paying off any debt that the school incurred in a given year. Not tuition was funding the school, not completely, but the church was. So the church was taking a step that they were not only going to add a grade, but they were going to add their first teacher who could be a special teacher to teach PE, and that was Pam McHugh. And she and I were the first 2 teachers that were hired from outside the church. They ran out of teachers, I guess. But they didn't know what they were getting into, especially not with me. I had been trained first as a social studies major to teach 7th through 12th grade. That was my passion. My first job was teaching high school psychology, because in Ohio, psychology is a social studies. And then I stayed home for 9 years while we had 3 children and loved every part of that. But it was time for me to get back to work. And I had gone to the university all those years retraining to be elementary certified in grades 1 through 6. So I had both certifications, and I was ready to go. So I came to this new school, which was totally new to me, and I was surprised at the love and the quality of teaching. But I was also a little surprised about what they didn't have. Foremost, they weren't chartered. They weren't certified by the state of Ohio. And I felt that was an important thing that parents should have. So in the first 2 years, I got maybe a little pushy. Maybe just wanting into school to be even better. We didn't have a library. I pushed for a library. I pushed for chapels. I pushed for certification, the chartering, and all that would make the school better. Well, that got me in trouble, because in 1988, the church had to come to the conclusion that they couldn't support the school financially anymore. And either we were going to have to close or we were going to have to be self-sufficient. So the board asked me if I would be administrator. We had had a couple of administrators who were part-time, but they only stayed 1 year or a short period of time. The board asked me if I would be administrator, principal, and I laughed. No, I never took training to be a principal, and my heart's in the classroom. I love teaching. So I turned that down. And the board pursued. They came back and asked me a second time. I declined a second time. And then the word was that we were going to have to close the school. They asked me one last time, and I yielded. God, this is too great a school to lose. That was my heart. So I agreed that I would do this for 1 year. In the process, I realized God had been preparing me all my life. From a grandfather that we lived with when I was a little girl. We had the upstairs of the house. My grandparents had the downstairs. He was in a wheelchair. He allowed me when I was 3, 4, and 5 to put my chin on his workbench, and he showed me how to use tools so I could fix something. He prepared me and gave me a husband who was the most patient, tolerant person, who allowed me to work too much. A man who came and did dishes after every medieval dinner, after every Thanksgiving dinner, because he was behind the scenes supporting us. Those preparations helped me do the job that God had allowed me to do, and He equips those He calls. And after that first year, we got to the last staff meeting, and I bawled. I cried. I had made it in a job I didn't look to have, in a job I didn't feel qualified to have, but God had His hand on Summit Christian School in spite of me. And He wasn't done writing the story about this great school. And for that, I'm grateful.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our 4-part series of conversations with former principal and administrator Mrs. Melanie Kemp. We are so grateful that she answered the Lord's call on her life to lead the school for 2 decades. And the legacy of her leadership lives on in everything that Summit Christian School is today. So we are very, very grateful and blessed by that time that she spent at the leadership position here at the school. Our focus now turns to part 3, which is where Mrs. Kemp will talk about the distinctives, the things that she had on her heart that would separate Summit Christian School, that would make it a unique and wonderful and amazing place to learn and grow. Join us for part 3, where she talks about the distinctives of Summit Christian School. We'll see you soon.